The next 20 minutes are going to be extremely valuable because we have Jen Jones as our guest today. She's an architect with her private practice in Washington State and Hawaii, and she's also a Vaastu practitioner. She will explain a little bit more what that is, but that would be a modern day space therapy, the way to design your home in a way that it promotes your physical health, nourishes your mind, increases financial wealth, promotes a happier lifestyle. And Jen is also a Yantra artist. It's a type of art that helps you get into a more meditative state. And I wish you could see some of her paintings, but we'll include the links to her website and her Instagram so you can check it out. It's just by looking at it, it already puts you in quite a peaceful state of mind. Jen, welcome to Think Clever Podcast. It's so nice to have you. I have quite a few questions for you today.
Thank you for inviting me, Stas. It's a pleasure to be here.
And it's beautiful artwork you have in the background. I feel like I just dropped into the Zen zone just by looking at it.
Yes, behind me I have two yantras. There's one that's in progress. There's a Surya yantra, which is 37 by 37 inches, painting it by hand. And then above that, there's a Mrityunjaya yantra, which I completed a couple of months ago. So
it's truly beautiful. I would love to. I'm sure everybody is wondering what is Vaastu, and how we can incorporate it into the design of our home to make the energy flow better. I would love to find out what it is and how did you get into it?
Well, Vaastu, what we're talking about is a word that's spelled V-A-A-S-T-U. To go back a little, the root, Vas, V-A-S, means to shine, means to emit light. So this is a science, an ancient science, developed in the Vedic period of India. And it's, you could say, sort of the sister sciences to yoga, Ayurveda, and Jyotish. It falls in line with that same map. But the purpose of Vaastu was to bring consciousness, the unseen energy of life, into form. And it's done through the arts. It's done through the 5 arts. It's done through poetry, dance, music, sculpture, and architecture. And under sculpture is also painting and drawing. So it's a way that we can benefit from the higher vibrations of consciousness into a form that we can understand.
Wow. That is a very deep and profound explanation. I love that. And does that, I mean, for people who are new to this, is it applicable to, let's say, the structure of the building, like when people build their homes, apartments, offices? Is it interior design? Is it exterior design, or is it both?
So what this is, Vaastu is centered on the formation of space. So no, it doesn't have much to do with interior design. For Vaastu, it does not matter where you put your red couch. It's really concentrating on the space that's created in between the walls. Because space is one of the 5 elements. It's known that primal space is one of the first elements. And space you can think of as consciousness. After space came air. The formation of air then became fire. From fire came water. From water came earth. And we humans rose out of earth. So what we're doing is we're connecting back to our primal state of consciousness. So if space is consciousness, we can actually reverse engineer this process through science, through form, through a rhythm. Now, in architecture, this comes into play in a specific ordering. So it comes in the form of geometry. Vaastu is really, its most stable form is in square form. It can also be rectangular. And it's really based on how we can tap in to earth energy. Remember I was saying about, we come from earth. So the earth has its own energy that's palpable, that we can tap into. So there's something called an earth grid, that we can tap into it with a piece of architecture. And we must align with true north. True north is what we align with, make contact with. And that's where we can energize a structure with that earth pulse. And if the structure is ordered in a very specific geometric way, more importantly, in a very mathematical way, in a certain rhythm, that space inside can be energized. And it can become like a beacon, like a lighthouse. And it's just the particles of energy are filled. And you can feel this if you enter in some old Vaastu temples, perhaps in India, or Angkor Wat in Cambodia, or Machu Picchu in Peru.
Wow.
A lot of these structures, this is a very ancient method of how to order architecture, but it's palpable and it's a direct experience for most people. Now, there is modern day Vaastu that is happening. I've participated in a couple of builds, and I'm currently designing a project in Mysore, India. And, it really comes down to the mathematics. There's a secret that's called ayati, and it's a formula that's done through a very, very precise measure. So we actually build to the 1/16th of an inch. I designed to the 1/64th of an inch because that measurement matters when it comes to vibration. What essentially we're doing is we're creating a structure that has a very high vibration inside of it. So you can think of this concept as vibrational matching, where you, as the dweller, you live, you cook, you work inside this house that has this incredibly higher vibration, which then affects you in a positive way. It can uplift you. So, I've had the amazing experience of participating in these Vaastu builds and being in these Vaastu homes, and there's a pulsation. It is incredible. So, it's a beautiful way of energizing space to uplift us. And what some of my teachers say is that, when you're not aligned with grid, when your house is not defined to a certain measure, it can actually do you harm. So if we look in the world around us, how many of our structures are not aligning properly?
And we're spending there like many, many hours a day. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Something to think about.
I love in one of your articles, there's your quote that I found. You said, just like us, houses need to be free of blockages and designed for energies to flow freely. It's so true. It's exactly that. It's whatever is in the body that's, if we're blocked, we're not able to express ourselves, energy gets trapped, eventually can manifest itself in a certain illness, and I suppose that's the way it is for the buildings, because it's for the structures. If the energy is not flowing, if you walk into the house and you don't feel comfortable, you can't sleep in the place, or you cannot create in the place, is because something is stuck and you need to get it moving. So
absolutely.
As you were discussing this, two things came to mind. The first one is obviously sacred geometry. I was wondering how similar or different, whether sacred geometry plays a certain aspect of it, and then also I think the topic more familiar to people is Feng Shui, and how is that similar to Vaastu?
Well, first, let's see. Feng Shui Feng Shui came out of Vaastu. So Vaastu is the processor to Feng Shui. And Feng Shui started following its own map in more of the Chinese culture. And so some things have changed along the way. In Feng Shui, there's a lot of remedies where you could sort of fix bad energy. You know, you can put up mirrors, and there's chimes, and there's plants, and there's ways of moving furniture around, and door placement, and things like that. There is no such thing in Vaastu. Vaastu is based on space. And it's really hard to fix a faulty Vaastu. So there's a couple of things that can be done if the house is within maybe 5 degrees of true north, perhaps. But in general, no, there's no fixes. Vaastu is something that's usually built new construction. I do encourage people to, sometimes if their house can't be fixed, sometimes what we do is we build what's called a dhyana garbha, a small meditation structure somewhere on their property. And it can be small. It can be 6 by 6 or 8 by 8. That can be aligned for Vaastu. Yeah. And let's see. Sorry, you asked me the first question. What was that question?
The first one is sacred geometry.
Oh, yes. Okay. So sacred geometry. Now, what makes Vaastu sacred? Really, well, first and foremost, it's the land. Not all land can be Vaastu. So the land itself has to have a certain pulsation. And that's not to say some land is better than others. What we're saying is what land is more beneficial for human habitation, right? So what's good for a scorpion might not be the best thing for a human. So we first look for a certain piece of land, has to slope in certain directions, like sloping down to the north or down to the east or down to the northeast is considered more beneficial. So the land has to have a certain pulse to it. Second, when we tap into that grid, that becomes sacred. We're aligning with the grid of the earth, with the pulsation of the earth. So already it makes it sacred. We're aligning to our true source, which is Mother Earth. And then what the Shilpis give us is this very sacred and rather protected formula called Ayati that has gone back for, thousands of years. And it's a certain measurement. So for example, someone wants to do a Vaastu structure, it's probably going to be some kind of square or rectangle. Well, not any size square or rectangle will do. So it has to be a very certain formula that's applied to the repetition. So what you're doing is you're starting to create this, it's sort of like frozen music. There's a certain rhythm and a beat that pulsates through these forms. And it's very ordered. It's extremely ordered. The other thing that makes it sacred is tapping into the elements. Those 5 elements that I was talking about. And when I say tapping in, I mean, this is subtle energy we're dealing with, right? This isn't gross form. So that's why it's palpable when you walk in. And in certain corners of the house, certain energies sort of rest and reside. In Vaastu structures, it's also sacred to keep the corners solid because a lot of the energy builds up in the corners. The main energy comes from the center of these structures. So you have earth energy, which comes up, and you have what I'd call cosmic energy, which comes down, and they commingle in these structures. And that's really what creates this pulsation. So it's a beautiful and profound science that comes through the arts, particularly architecture.
And you explain it in such a beautiful way as well. I calm down and relax, my whole body relax just by listening about Vaastu.
Well, Stas, you're also
staring at the
Yantra.
That was my follow-up question. Is that an extension of Vaastu, or do they play together? Can you tell us more about Yantras?
Yeah, I can. Well, I guess first I have a little story because how I got into Yantra, how I got into Vaastu, this sort of leads right into it.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back a little bit, just a quick little childhood thing. When I was 7 years old, my family decided that we would go spend a year in Israel. I lived in Haifa, Israel. And we went to so many sacred sites. And it was almost like a nonstop, for a whole year. What happened to me when I got back to the United States, I had turned 8. I started developing seizures. And I was a very sensitive child. I got overwhelmed very easily. So I started having these seizures, but what went along with these seizures right before they were going to happen was a profound awakening of heightened sound, heightened smell, heightened senses. And then I would go into a seizure. So this happened for a number of years. And I was able to start to manage it, through lifestyle and whatnot. But what ended up happening, I had my very last seizure when I was in my 20s. And I happened to be in architecture school, and I was abroad. And I was actually in Venice, Italy at the time. I was on a program where we were studying monasteries throughout Europe, mostly in northern Italy. And again, we were going to all these sacred sites, sacred monasteries. And I hadn't had a seizure in a while. But that day I felt everything was heightened when I was walking around in this monastery. Again, I was seeing lights, sounds that no one else could hear but me. So, and I remembered what could happen. And sure enough, I couldn't stop it. The seizure happened. It was one of those things where, I would start falling forward, and then my spine would become erect and I'd fall straight down. Well, my head ended up hitting the cobblestones. I was in Venice at the time. And I guess I went unconscious, but what ended up happening was I came outside of my body. I was fully awake, having an experience of watching me in my body with people starting to run toward me and having this out-of-body experience. And eventually coming back into my body and knowing that experience was a different type of consciousness. It was entering into an unseen realm of subtle energy. And I wanted to know more. And I wanted to know why this stuff was happening to me. So I ended up coming back to the States after that. And I started, I was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico at the time. And I went to, she found me, an energy healer that really helped me. And I became so curious about subtle energy and why this was happening. So I started working with my body. I started studying indigenous cultures, primal cultures, especially out there in Santa Fe, the Native Americans. So when I went back to school, I had one more year. It was a 5th year thesis student. I did my thesis on the Anasazi and their concepts of primal space. So I was already in architecture, starting to go, not what was on the gross form, what was underneath it. So, and at the same time, when I was at my thesis, and I was at School of Architecture, Syracuse in upstate New York, I was spending a lot of nights hunched over the drafting table. There were no computers back then. So, and I was in a lot of pain, honestly, just, drawing day and night. And someone said, hey, down the hall, there's a yoga class. And I said, what's that? So I ended up going down there, and I had my first, yoga class where we did, sun salutations. And I was doing those, and I realized that I had done this before. Wow. And it was a profound experience. So it's been 25 years since I graduated Syracuse. So it's been 25 years of practicing architecture and practicing yoga. And they were always parallel existences for me, architecture and yoga, and the philosophy between the two. And I started getting more and more interested in the subtle energy. And, there was a place where they started to cross. And I started to deepen that and to be more curious, more discovery about the places where they crossed. And there was one night that I had a very vivid dream. And in the morning, I woke up and sketched what I had seen. And it was the Yantra. It was a Venus Yantra. Little did I know. And I started really questioning, the opening that was happening in me and what this meant. So, I just continued in this process of discovery, and I ended up being invited to study Vaastu. So the Yantras led me to my Vaastu teacher, who teaches us about the sacred arts, all the sacred arts. So Vaastu is one of them. I mean, Vaastu is the science that, moves through the different arts. So the art of Yantra is fascinating because it really embodies what we called Om sound, which most people have heard of, Om sound. But the little known expression of Om light, it's the equal and opposite of Om sound. So Om sound and Om light, light and sound, they go together. And a Yantra has them both together, as does the architecture. But in the Yantra form, people work with it. It's a very tangible way of working with both sound and light. A lot of people work with mantra. Not a lot of people work with Yantra. Like if you were to go to a movie and you just listen to it, but you didn't have the visual, right? A little tricky. But what if you had the visual and not the sound? So what Yantra does, it actually has both. So you're able to deepen the experience of consciousness more so. And what a yantra really is what is already inside of you. You're just invoking that. There's nothing outside of you. It's all within you. And the Vaastu structure, when you're inside of it, what that's doing is it's enlivening your heart. It's quickening the vibration of your own heart through the space. It all comes back to a heart-centered practice.
Wow, Jen, that's a beautiful story of how you came to this and how it evolved and how Yantra is called you into Vaastu. And what, I feel like I was going to ask you if there was like times when you had to push beyond your comfort zone and take a leap of faith, but it seems like your story is so like you were following your intuition from the very beginning. You were just like your transformation story is like a flower just blossoming and blossoming, and then there's more and there's more and there's more. It's really amazing how, from the very, perhaps because in the beginning it was so intense for you with the seizures that it kind of guided you into like exploring what's on the other side and to the curiosity that you had about it.
Yeah. I wasn't satisfied either with the gross, comments I was getting back from doctors. Oh, take this pill or do this. And I'm like, there's a reason why. I love to discover the root reason behind it. And I find that if I just keep opening, to the discovery of it all, the answers come. The teachers arrive when they arrive. Mm-hmm. The visions come when they come. And, I really believe that there's teachers that I have that are seen, and there's so many that are unseen that flow through us if we're open to that and to be willing. I do wake up every morning with a mantra, thy will, not mine, be done. Thy divine will. What is thy will? And open to that. And yeah.
And some breath work.
There's a flow.
That you wake
and
up.
Breath work. Oh yes, I have an order that I follow for sure. To not get wrapped up in my head and to have a heart-based practice. I chant. I participate in a breathwork practice, a 3-part breath every day. Done it every day. A lot of mantra practice, and of course, yantra practice. Yeah.
I'm always, as I'm exploring my artistic side and trying to find a way to express myself, and I find it quite challenging to get in a zone of just having ideas flow and, type or speak whatever form of expression that I'm taking. And I realized that, and I'm slowly just coming to this from this perspective, because expressing myself is quite new to me. It's quite recent, but I realized that when I put myself more on I would say, the backdrop, and kind of listen to more to what needs to come out, think of myself more as an instrument rather a creator, try to meditate before, or get myself into that state. In biohacking we say flow state, to get yourself in a flow state so that ideas flow through you and you can express, because if I'm thinking that it's just me and I'm typing these words and that's all I got, it's one type of creation, right? But if I'm saying, please express through me, let's whatever needs to come out, let it come out, then it's a lot more powerful. And as I'm doing research for the book that I'm starting to write, a lot of people who have amazing innovations and creations, and artists and musicians and inventors, they always say, it came to me in my dream, or when I was in the shower, or like, this invention does not belong to me. It's they never really take ownership of these ideas because they come from somewhere else. And so I the way you talk, the way you express, like how your morning routine is, how you connect to yantras, I feel like this is all, or like, just flowing through you.
Yeah, we talked about the blockages, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the practice. It's me getting out of the way.
Nice.
That's my practice, because the more I can just become a conduit. I mean, Vaastu wants to flow. Consciousness is beautiful. It's bliss. It wants to flow effortlessly through us. What we get to do is find ways of reducing our blockages,
Mm-hmm.
and letting it flow through, allowing it to come through us. And it's a daily practice. There's some days that I need to, participate in, I would say, deeper meditations, and, if I'm out of sorts. But sometimes there's moments in life that can be, I would say, challenged. That can also be doorways. Some of the, I would say, most sort of where creativity surges through me is in times of difficulty, because I can become more focused on the goal, can really make contact. Where am I going? What am I aligning to? And focus 100% on that.
Wow. Can you share a few, for people, I'm sure people who are finishing this interview and they've been looking at yantras for half an hour, they're probably wondering, where they could get some, how to connect with you. And then also, if you can share a few tips, if people decide to get this yantra, like, where do you put it in the house? How do you suggest to connect with it? Maybe the type of practice that you do with it, because I'm sure it's a lot more than just a painting that you show off to your guests. There's a certain practice that comes with it.
Yes. Well, first of all, if anyone's interested in the Yantra art, well, you can find me on Instagram, karma_by_design. Karma by Design is my IG. I also have an Etsy shop called Cosmic Forms.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have a website, karmabydesign.net. And through karmabydesign.net, there's a contact form if someone wants to contact me directly. I'm happy to answer any questions. And as far as the yantras, yantras are very personal. So, I would encourage people to go onto Etsy site. I have 9 yantras there. And really open yourself up. What speaks to you? The yantra, it's a relationship, like any relationship you'd have with someone. And there's going to be a exchange of energy that you're going to have with that yantra. So so it's like inviting royalty into your house, I would say. You know, you're going to treat it really well. You're going to place it in your house where you're going to work with it. Typically in Vaastu, the most sacred part of the house, more of the spiritual part of the house, is in the northeast corner. That's where the water element is. So, you know, most people probably don't live in a Vaastu house, but the northeast corner is still very spiritual. So take out your compass or your iPhone, set it on true north, not magnetic north. We don't want to align with magnetic north because that's a moving target. Mm-hmm. So the northeast is a great place to place the yantras.
Quick question: would that, for people who have altar in their house, would that be also northeast, since this is, like you said, the most energetic place?
It is the most energetic place. However, that might just not be practical for people. So, you know, I mean, yantras want to stay in one place, though. They don't want to be moved around. So if you have an altar, perhaps an altar facing east is beneficial. Mm-hmm. So I do have altar size yantras. I also have larger size yantras. So there's an 11 by 11, 24 by 24, and 37 by 37, and they're all on canvas. And I specifically made them on canvases in order to keep the form. So like I said, these are Vaastu forms. So they're already energized. So they're the perfect vehicle for a yantra practice. So, and there will be this back and forth. It's almost like a breathing between you and that yantra, you know, with mantra, a soft open gaze. And like I said, these energies that you're seeing in the yantra are inside of you. So in each one has a very particular flavor. Maybe someone's wanting to work on their voice, allowing their voice to come up. Well, perhaps a Mars yantra might work in that realm. You know, sometimes people come to me and say, oh, my Vedic astrologer or my Jyotish practitioner has suggested a yantra for me. So, but I'm happy to talk to people about it.
As soon as I settle here in Portugal and I have more permanent place, I'm going to get one of these. And for, you know, next time I record a podcast is going to be one in the background on the east corner. Yeah, and this has been so much information that I was never even exposed to, and it's fascinating how you presented it in such a deep and spiritual, peaceful way. You know, you're not just an architect; you're like a spiritual architect. You know, that goes beyond the shapes. You know, and digs deeper into, you know, how to do things properly. And I feel like as people are awakening to a more conscious way of living, you know, in creating structures and creating them in a way that promotes how we feel, our mental and our physical health. You know, I think it's extremely important to take these things into consideration. And you know, I feel like you're leading the way with this new wave of how architecture should be conducted, you know, and everything that comes out of architecture, the way even we present ourselves, and how we take care of our own energy, and how we get into the more way of service and connecting with the source.
Absolutely. You know, let's work on finding the spiritual in the forms that we have, because it's already here for us. We just have to awaken to it.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to connecting soon with you again.
Thank you very much, Stas, for having me.